Hi from me, Romy Stach, and welcome to Derech Eretz, the Way of the World. In today's show, Rabbi Matthew Liebenberg explores the concept of social justice within Judaism. We reflect on the lives of trade unionists Leon and Lorna Levy and meet with the founder of Ikayalami, Andrea Bolnick. The concepts of justice, righteousness, and freedom come together in the vision of an ideal world articulated by the biblical prophets. This may be expressed in the idea that each of us can make our own contribution to making the world a better place. There is evidence of this in a strong Jewish involvement in advancing social justice and in protecting the rights of other minority groups. Rabbi Matthew Liebenberg elaborates further.
One of the bywords of our generation is social justice. People who go out, who are concerned about humanity, about the environment, and do their utmost to make sure that we leave for our children a much better world. I believe that the true champion of social justice in the ancient world was the prophet Isaiah, who gave a scalding sermon in chapter 98 of his book. And this chapter is in fact read by Jewish people around the world on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And there the prophet puts into context and perspective what is the purpose of a fast. And he turns to the Israelites in his generation and he says, you turn to God and you say, God, you don't look at us when we fast. You don't answer our prayers. Why don't you do that? And the prophet Isaiah says, because you're missing the point of a fast. You think that a fast is just about not eating and not drinking and beating your chests and wearing sackcloth. He says, that's not the point of a fast. The point of a fast is for people to repent and to look at their deeds and to try to improve. And he says, and you know what the problem with this generation is? There is no social justice. They don't care about those people who are oppressed or are going through difficult times. And it was no different then than it is today. Today we have millions of people across the world who are living in poverty and in dire straits. And Isaiah says that if you want God to listen to your prayers and to watch your fast days, be concerned about those people in humanity, in society, who are vulnerable. And he gives many examples. He says, bring the poor into your own home. You know, it's very easy when we're driving along the streets and we see a beggar and we toss them a coin. Isaiah said, that's not enough. Bring them into your home. Try to help them. The highest value of charity is not just to give somebody a coin, but to teach them how to earn their own income. He says, if you see a naked person, dress them, clothe them, go out to your support. And he promises incredible rewards for people who do this. And he says, sometimes you don't even have to go looking that far. Mibsarcha al titaleim. Don't turn a blind eye to your own family, to your own relatives. And if he says, perhaps you'll think that this money is not spent well and it's a waste, it's not a waste. Because if society is improved and the vulnerable people in society are uplifted, then that means that that is a much better society. There are so many different ways that we can get involved in social justice in our generation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to set up NGOs or large societies. Yes, we can join them, we can be involved in them, but just in our own communities, to look out for those people who are vulnerable. Who are the vulnerable people? So the prophet Isaiah says, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, people who come from other countries, migrants. We've got an enormous problem in the world today with immigration, people who are fleeing from countries where there is war, where there is conflict, and they often find that the doors are closed in front of their face. The prophet Isaiah says, no, that's not how you should treat them. If somebody comes to you and they're suffering and they're in a difficult situation, they're a stranger, bring them into your home. Look after them. This is how we create a society that is a meaningful society. And not a society, as the Bible says, like the society of Sodom, that only cared about itself and not about those who were vulnerable in society. I believe that the prophet was the one who set in place for all time the importance of social justice, to go beyond ourselves and to look after those in our society who need our help and our support.
Derech Eretz.
Opposed to the apartheid regime and the injustices that befell a large part of the South African population, Leon Levy was a key figure in the formation of the first non-racial trade union federation in South Africa, called the South African Congress of Trade Unions, SACTU. As president, he was not only involved in the day-to-day concerns related to wages and better working conditions, but also in the wider liberation struggle, finding himself arrested for high treason and eventually being forced into exile to the United Kingdom.
At the age of about 23, trade unionists were being banned. And by 1954, almost the entire progressive trade union movement had lost all its leaders. And I was asked whether I would like to take a job in a couple of the trade unions, and I became more and more active. And there were about 14 or 15 trade unions that were brave enough to resist the temptation of falling into line with the current political activity of the government.
I changed my point of view about the world at a very early age. And from my student days till this very moment, I've held true to a certain set of values. So in that period in Johannesburg, in the late 50s and the 60s, I was finding my political feet, and they were definitely away from the kind of status quo type politics.
At the same time, there was the growth of the liberation movement, and we became quite clear in our minds that when we went out to organize African workers, that their problems were about passes, their problem was about social justice, that they could not move where they wanted to, live where they wanted to. And so we realized that there was no peace, no freedom, no opportunity for African workers if there wasn't political and economic freedom for them. And so we became active both in the liberation movement and in the trade union.
It comes from the point of deciding that there was something wrong with South Africa. There was something wrong with the setup, the race setup. And from that, it naturally follows, it flows, that you want to do something about it.
As the years went by and we were active in all these activities, we began the campaign for the Congress of the People. That was a campaign to adopt a freedom charter that would be the basis of the society that we all wanted to see established in South Africa. The Freedom Charter talks about social justice. There shall be peace and freedom. There will be education for all. And what kind of society, what kind of country would you like to live in? People were writing these little, writing what they wanted on little pieces of paper. They were all taken eventually to a spot in Johannesburg, and they were pieced together. And the Freedom Charter was developed from those ideas. It was regarded as a treasonable document, and the police knocked at our doors early one morning, 5 o'clock, and arrested 156 of the leaders on a charge of high treason. And in fact, it was the Freedom Charter that was on trial. The accused were taken to the local prisons, the local Pretoria prison, where I was incarcerated for some months at a time. And we had a bus that took us up and down from Johannesburg to Pretoria. And we were there for something like 4.5 years in the courtroom, having our counsel deal with the Freedom Charter.
After a period of detention, Leon took an exit visa from detention, and he came to London, where we started a new life together. But I have to say, it was the start of another life, but it wasn't a start of new principles. Those principles stayed with me. And it was just a question of doing other things, but still always moving with exactly the same viewpoint. When we decided to come back and live in South Africa, I was determined that I wasn't going to live in Johannesburg. So coming to Cape Town after so many years was a new place altogether.
We wanted to be in a free South Africa. After all, we had devoted our lives in one way or another to the cause of liberation in South Africa, and we wanted to be part of the change.
As a student in the mid-1980s, Andrea Bolnick was actively involved in anti-apartheid work and was an active member of an anti-apartheid youth movement. Through volunteer work, she was exposed to the work of Slum Shack Dwellers International. She immediately saw the vulnerability of shack dwellers to fires, floods, disease, and eviction. Wanting to make a difference, Andrea established Ikayalami.
I grew up in a privileged environment, but I was always taught by my parents to respect all people equally, and in fact respect people who were less privileged than I, even more so. I was a very sensitive child, and if one has a sense of humanity, one has to stand against injustices. And I guess that stems from also my background, being Jewish and coming from a family history of persecution. Our family came from Russia, and they were persecuted by the Russians, they were persecuted by the Germans, and even going further back in history, there's just been a whole series of oppression and persecution purely for the fact of being different. And that realization that my parents instilled in us was to say that if other people are being disrespectful for others and being prejudiced against others, one has the obligation to stand up against oppression, even if it's against others. Because if other people are oppressed and you're not doing anything about it, you're negating your own human decency. I've always had an interest in social justice and also an interest in design and spatial planning. So what I realized is that perhaps what one needs to do is to look at ways in which people who live in informal settlements have resolved this problem, because there are probably in the region of currently about 3 million households in South Africa who live informally, and they've come up with a solution of how to deal with this challenge. In about 2005, I started doing research into alternative forms of shelter provision, looking to see the ingenuity that already exists in informal settlements, working with shack dwellers, and then coming up with a number of prototypes to see how we could design something that, or how I could design something that is quick to build, easy to transport, fire and flood resistant, very adaptable to expansion, and durable, and very importantly affordable.
Realizing the level of inadequacy of government efforts to address housing needs, Andrea Bolnick's desire to make a difference was ignited, and so Ikayalami was founded.
In 2006, I set up Ikayalami, which means my home in Xhosa and Zulu. At the heart of Ikayalami's way of thinking is to view informality and urban poverty as an emergency.
We were experiencing problems because we are living in a dense place. So we are experiencing like fires, check fires, like when it's in winter, when it's raining, we were experiencing floods. So we wanted to open up some space. The only way we can do it, it was due to re-blocking.
Blocking out is a reshaping of the structures because we realized that there is a density in our informal settlement. Then we were asking for the government for the land so that we can build our structures nicely. But the government said always there is no land. So we're just starting designing our settlement. We see that there is a space in our area, but it's just that the way of we building our structures is not according to the lines.
So one aspect is the clear pathways. Another one is to create public open spaces that are also safer for the community, places where children can actually play. And also one of the huge powers of reblocking is that it actually holds government to account to provide the services that they're meant to provide to communities. So in a sense, that in itself also vastly improves people's quality of life while they wait for the government subsidy.
The way we are living in those shacks in our communities, if you don't involve the community, then you won't succeed in anything that you are trying to do in the community. So it is very crucial that you involve the community, make sure that the communication, whoever is going to work in that particular community must involve the community so that the project can be successful.
So this is the first prototype, in fact the first in situ prototype that was built. And in fact Pumezo and I, when we first met in 2009 in Sheffield Road, and we built the framework for the first double story, most of the people in the community and in the settlement were saying they didn't want a double story. And Pumezo was the one person that kept on saying, I want a double story, and I want a double story in my home.
The reason to build the prototype like this, a double story one, the city said there is no land, so we just want to show the government that there is enough land in our informal settlement. If we can just build the double story, then we create more spaces on the ground. The community was very interested in this kind of double story. So we would like to take this initiative forward so that we can show the government that also we as a community together with an NGO, we can do our life, we can change our lives better.
Pumezo is a great asset for informal settlement upgrading, because not only is he a very strong leader in his own community, but he's also a leader of a social movement. So the concept of what gets done here gets translated and gets exposed to many more settlements and many more leaders.
Since I've met Andy 2009, she's like my sister, she's like my mother, she's like everything to me, because she is a kind person. She has the effort of doing things. She doesn't give up so quickly. she's a strong person.
If it was somebody else, someone would have lost interest in our community long time ago because of these robbery incidents that happened there, because we were robbed 4 times, but he never ceased to leave us. He was always trying to get to help the community of Piti. So she's got a very strong personality.
If the community is at the helm and leading the project, then there's a chance of it being sustainable long term, and people actually believing in it and believing that it's theirs. One of the key functions that Ikayalami plays is in that translation from the former world, from whoever we deal with, the architects, the engineers, the city planners, is to work with the community and to be the interface with the community. Ultimately, it's their home, it's their life, and it's got to be something that they will value and want to keep in the way that it was created and in their vision. And if that's done, then more communities will actually call for this and say this is how they would like to replicate, and how this project can then expand.
There's a bright future here. I just have imagined when the whole settlement is already done. It's gonna change our kids' life and also our lives. Once we finish this kind of project, and the safety is gonna be good, and no more floods, no more fire. We're gonna stay safer than it was before.
So the term Derech Eretz, in Hebrew, Derech is the path, and I would say that it's my path in life. So if you want to ask me what my path in life is to work in this sector and to contribute as much as I can to the alleviation of poverty and to improve people's lives.
Devarim, or Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 20 states, "Justice, justice shall you pursue." The pursuit of a just society is one of the most fundamental concepts of Judaism. Giving to those in need is not viewed as a generous, magnanimous act. It is simply an act of justice and the right thing to do. We would love for you to join our conversation, so share your thoughts and stories on our Facebook page, Spirit Sister Productions Network. From me, Romy Stoch, and the Derech Eretz team, we wish you a peaceful and just week ahead.